So, I was with my mother. I can't see you at all. That's just a shame, but I'll try and figure out. I was with my mother the other day. I'm 62. She was 90, and I was driving, and she was telling me how to drive. And she doesn't understand the GPS, and she thinks she knows exactly at all times where she's going. So she was giving me a constant rendition of how I'm driving and if people are coming up on my right and people are coming up on my left. So if I was to respond in a juvenile manner to what would I say? A little bit of participation back and forth. What would I say? Shut up. Yeah, that's a good one. How old would that be? About 11 years old. Give me another response. No. Yeah. What else would I say? Get out. Yeah, exactly. She can only walk about 10 feet in a line, but that would be a classic. All right. I probably did that when I was 16. What else would I say? Yeah, stop backseat driving. I'd get angry. I'd get reactive. I'd start to treat her like, poorly. Instead, I responded like an adult. It took me a long time to figure out how to do this. What would an adult response be? Thank you. No, that's code for that's code for something else. But go ahead. It's too sarcastic. Give me a real adult response. Please be quiet. Well, depending on tone of voice. If I say, look, please be quiet. How old is that? Yeah, it could be 17, 16, 15. Pick your age. It could be any of your ages, right? It could be my age, too. What else? You're right. I might say that. Yeah, you're right. Let's try it next time. Now, that starts to sound like an adult. That sounds really good. I usually, when I do that, after I'm really kind of quiet. When I get out of the car, I usually just go up and give her a hug, and I say, thank you for caring, and I appreciate it. It took me a long time to figure that out. So my father was, I was my father's child for 18 years, just like you were. And I was my father's father for about 7 years. Everybody know what that means? So he had dementia, and he didn't know where he was. He died just before he figured out, just before he lost contact with us. So the fact that I was his child, no great revelation to you. The fact that I was his parent, no great revelation to you. The question was, for how long was I a peer? It was how long I was a peer. Same thing with my mother. I'm about to probably start to take care of her eventually. She's living right near me. I'm the son that's a parent to take care of her, so I probably will take care of her. But the question was, for how long was I a peer? And I want to think about today just for a minute, what does peer look like? Because I want you on that road. I want you on the trail. You have to start thinking about what it looks like to be a peer. Your parents might find that very difficult. Why wouldn't your parents want you to be a peer? Anybody? Anybody got some insight into that? Say it again. Say it again. Control, exactly right. Very nicely said. They might want to keep control. Do you know why most parents want to keep control? They're worried that? Say it again. Yeah, they're worried you're going to do something foolish. Anybody here done any foolish? Raise your hand. Exactly. I know the lights are up, but I hope that was 100% participation. Right? Why else do they want to keep control? They don't get hurt, trying to protect you. The other thing, usually in terms of their own background, they want to keep control because they're afraid of losing you. And of course, if they control you, what do they actually do? Lose you. It's one of these very strange things where we do things paradoxically as parents. So they want to keep control. They want to keep control. And if they do that, what will you do? You're going to want to leave more. Everybody's going to apply to University of Hawaii or whatever, UCLA. So the question is, are you starting to become a peer? So we're going to leave your parents out of it because it's their job to figure that part of it out, but are you starting to become a peer? Are you starting to become an adult and to think about it? So everybody know what August 20th is? Everybody know? What happens on August 20th? Probably universally for most of you in the room. Some of you might not. Some of you might decide to go into a career or work or a vocational school or get going in a profession or something like that. But for most of you, August 20th, you're going to be what? You're going to be dropped off at college. And in one day, you're going to go from being a child to a independent person. It takes about 10 minutes, actually. Your parents are still making your bed, and they're putting your books away, and they're trying to give you lectures on the last thing, brush your teeth, and all this kind of thing. All of a sudden, they leave, and you are an adult, and who cares whether you brush your teeth after that? Who cares whether you go to class? Do you know the colleges you're going to go to? Most of them, it won't be true for all of them, but a lot of them that you're going to be going to, the big universities, they are already planning on losing the bottom 10% of the class. They're already planning on it. They're already planning. So, bless you. So who's going to monitor? Who's going to monitor whether you go to class or not? Anybody? Guess? Nobody. Yourself. Right. There comes the answer. Yourself. Who's going to care whether you get up? My roommate in college, interesting guy. He knew he was going into his family business. So he decided to arrange all of his classes by the building next to him, and no class could be before noon. He didn't know it was the 60s. This goes back a long way, but it was in Vietnam years, and the building actually burned down, and eventually his classes were all over the campus, and whatever, it really backfired on him. So anyway, I'm interested in you becoming a peer, and you ought to start the process now, and I just wrote out a few notes. They'll be common sense for you. Are you already internally motivated? I'm hoping your parents aren't saying, get your homework done. Or you should be studying, or you should be turning off the the internet so you can get going on the quiz that's happening tomorrow, the test that's going on, because in 2 years or 1 year, for some of you, how many are graduating this year? Yeah, a bunch of you. So you're graduating this year. Guess who's going to be telling you to turn off your this and turn off to that, or stop drinking beer, or whatever you're doing at college? Who's going to be stopping you from that? Nobody. So I'm hoping you're already internally driven like that, that you actually have some kind of internal motivation, that the reason you want to do well is coming from where? It's coming from inside you. It's the greatest wish for your parents. So they no longer have to play the role of parent. That's the whole goal here. Second thing I'm interested in is you setting boundaries. Are you setting boundaries? Are you setting your own boundaries? What kind of boundaries are going to be set for you at college? None. I remember I was at Tufts University up there. I don't know if you know Tufts up in Boston. So I was up in Tufts up in Boston. Probably 15 times. It was at 12 midnight. We all decided to go to Cape Cod. We get to Cape Cod by 2 o'clock. We sleep. I don't know if I had exams the next day or what, but done over time. It's like dumb, let alone driving at night, et cetera, et cetera. It took me a couple years to figure out how to actually set some internal boundaries. So I'm hoping you're setting your own. I'm hoping your parents aren't still boundarying you. I'm hoping you don't have a curfew. Because who's setting the curfew? You. You're setting the curfew. You're saying, what's a reasonable time to be in? I should be in like around 11:30 because I've got a junior license, or I should be in around midnight because that's a reasonable time to come in. And I'm hoping you're setting your own curfew. I'm hoping you're setting your own boundary, because who's going to set a curfew for you in 2 years or 1 year or in 4 months? Nobody. They actually don't care. They're actually banking on the bottom 10% flunking out. My daughter with debates, my youngest, I have 2 older ones, with debates, 2 of her roommates didn't make it to October. I thought that was really pretty good. What a record. First $28,000 that year was put down by their parents and lost, and they didn't make it till October. Because once they got to school, they had no internal motivation, they had no boundary, and obviously they didn't feel good about themselves. Do you feel good about yourself? I hope you do. Do you know how you build a self-concept? How do you build it? You build it from within. You build it by studying. You build it by going to programs like this. You build it. I'm hoping you feel good about yourself and you treat yourself well. So let's talk about a few of the skills. What does it mean to be a peer with a parent? You stop all the reactivity. So if I said to you, I don't think you're very competent, give me a response, not a reaction. I disagree would be a reaction. Actually, let's just do reactions. It's more fun. I don't think you're very competent. Yeah, it's your fault. You raised me. That's a good one. That's a classic. You can use that for about the first 40 years. It's your parents. Your life is your parents' fault. That's a real good one. That would get you a long way. So that was a very good example. Give me another reaction. Say it again? Yeah, you're not competent either. That's good. Then you can have in the same family, you can have a contest for who's the least competent, which really is a wonderful discussion to have with your folks. That's a good one. All right? Give me a response. No, okay is code for screw you. But nicely said. Thoughtfully said. Why do you think that way is good, but use my language? Let me give me a pure response. I don't think you're very competent. Hold on to yourself. Hold on to your own power. Hold on to your adulthood. Give me a pure response. You're very close. Steve, how do you define competence? And what are you doing? Who are you making explain themselves? Me. So if I said to you, why don't you grow up, you'd say what? What would you ask? Can you define being grown up? You would actually put it into a dialogue, and you would stop the 12-year-old behavior, which, by the way, your parents are probably doing some of the 12-year-old behavior. Forget about age with this stuff. I certainly do it with my wife when we're having a lousy day. I end up reactive to her. So if I said I don't like you, you'd ask, why not's close? Use my language. What don't you like? And we'd have to have a discussion. We'd have to have a discussion. And once we have a dialogue, what are we? We're peers. That's exactly right. We're not doing, anybody here do drama? Anybody know what drama looks like? You don't like this presentation? If you did drama, what would you do? I am sick and tired of the way you... How old is that? Right, exactly. So just queuing it up. So you wouldn't do drama. You'd give up drama. You'd let that stuff go. You do a dialogue. You'd go after your parents. What I mean by that is you get to know them as a human being. Your parents have a ton of weaknesses. They have a ton of strengths. They love you dearly. They did some things well. They did some things poorly. If I talk with the parents, there are a few parents in the room, and I ask you to raise your hand, how many of you did some things well and some things poorly in raising your children? Every parent would raise their hand. I did some things well. I did some things poorly. I was married in my junior year in college and had a child by 21. What did I know? You know what the average age of marriage is now? It's actually 29 and moving up, all right? So the question is, do you understand your parents? Do you know their difficulties? Are they opening up their difficulties to you? Are you talking as peers? Do you tell them some of your difficulties? Do they open up some of their weaknesses? Do they tell you where they're scared, where they're frightened? Do you know where they're frightened, and can you tell them where you're frightened, or where you have some insecurity, or where you feel great, or where you feel hopeful? Can you have a peer-to-peer discussion that's outside of parent-child? Do you know that peerage is the highest correlated factor with a successful marriage? If I felt my mother to be dominant and aggressive towards me and I was still acting like a child, who am I going to marry? I'm going to marry my mother or? Opposite, exactly. See, you've got so much insight. I don't know what I'm even doing here. So yeah, you'd marry someone the opposite and I'd be dominant and whatever, but we wouldn't develop a peer relationship. We wouldn't develop a peer relationship. So you're internally driven and you live close to the boundaries. And all I mean on that, am I time up? Did I run out? All right. So you live close to the boundaries. Whatever boundaries your parents set up, are they totally unreasonable? Can you live somewhere there? For instance, my kids never had a curfew. But it wasn't like there wasn't a curfew. I just said, what's a reasonable time to be in? And they said they knew what time it was reasonable to be in at 18, 17. They knew the reasonable time. It could just be it reasonably so we don't have to do this parent-child thing. So if my kid shows up at 3, I've got to become the parent again. It's boring. It's really boring by this. We're all tired. We're all tired. We've raised you guys. You guys are great. You're smart. You're competent. You're doing great things. We're tired. We don't want to play this role anymore. So if you're 18, you come in a reasonable hour, everybody gets out of the role. You do your part, the parent does their part, glad to see you and whatever, and we're meeting in a very different kind of place. So what does it mean to stay a child? It has enormous consequences. One is the chance that you're going to bomb out of college are incredibly high. The chances you get stuck are incredibly high. My son tells me this story. 10 years after high school, came back, met one of his good friends who was doing pot every single night, smoking pot every single night, never stopped. And he said it was so interesting, He said it was like time had not changed. It was just exactly the same. Nothing had moved for this kid. And he said we had nothing to talk about. And it was the last time he ever saw him. So a couple ideas very quickly. Goals. Become independent. Become independent. Just become independent. Everybody working? Everybody building their own industry? You're working? Everybody making money? Everybody? My daughter's finally done. This is it. She just got an apartment yesterday. She's 25, just finished her master's. She's done. Last nickel I'm ever going to give her, except for like Christmas and a few holidays. But she's done. She can pay for herself now. She's got it all. She's taken over the car insurance. She's taken over the medical insurance. She's done. She's independent. And now what do I have left? A great friendship. She's my hiking buddy. We've gone hiking all over the world at different places. She's just a good friend anymore. I'm out of the parent role. That is the goal. So you gotta do some things to build your identity. Are you good at something? Go after it. Whatever you're good at, I don't care what it is, go after it. Can you create industry, which means get to work? Work. It just does not work. Do you know the highest correlated factor with trust? Anybody know this by chance? There's a lecture I'm going to actually give tonight to a group of philanthropists tonight. The highest correlated factor with trust is you have a good identity. You like yourself. You've built something. You've actually, developed your sense of self. You've found something you loved. You went after it. You really build your own industry. You've liked something, and it enables you to trust other people because you feel good about who you are. If you don't build that, some of you might have come from a considerable wealth living in this neighborhood. You might come from considerable wealth, and your identity might become wealth. Do you have any idea what happens to you if that happens? If your identity becomes money and you never build it or you never create it yourself, there's enormous consequences to that down the road. Build your identity, build your sense of self. Go back into relationship with your parents. I would urge every one of you in the room to take your parents out to friendlies. If you're really working and making a lot of money, take them out to, I don't know, or some nice restaurant out here. But take them out to friendlies, take them out, and ask them to talk about themselves. Go find out who they are. Find out what makes them tick. Find out the good and the bad and the ugly from their own background. Tell them you'd like to become more of a peer. How do we go do that? And have the open conversations with them. Take them out to dinner. They'll be scared to death. Don't take them out together. They'll team up against you. Take them out singularly. Just take your dad out alone, peer-to-peer, and say, Dad, how are we going to do this over the next 2 years or 1 year or the last 3 months I'm here before I go off to college? Because I want now to become your friend. Financial independence, that's an obvious. Find out what is intrinsically meaningful. Do you know what I mean by that? Here's something, if you can just think this through, find something that you love to do. Don't do something someone has told you to do. Find something that is intrinsically meaningful to you, and your world goes better. And the last thing is be reflective. Whose fault is your life? It is your fault at this point. It is no one else's fault. You have all the choices right out in front of you. Your parents have unbelievably little amount of control at this point. You could lie, cheat, you can get away with it, you can do it. It is your ball game at this point. Your parents want to be there, they want to guide you, they want to work with you. There are tons of helping professions that will, I'm sure you heard a bunch of them today, that would be there for you in all sorts of ways, but it's your choice. So please be reflective. I just listened to a tape that a young gal, 16, wrote that I wish I could have had the time because I would have actually read what she wrote. Because it was totally reflective about her life, the role of her parents, the good and the bad and the ugly in her family. She really had it integrated. She's going to go a long way. So in 14 seconds, become a peer. Start now. Don't wait for your parents to do it with you. Go do it with your parents. It gives you a lot of power. It'll give you a lot of sense of self. And it's the greatest single thing you can do to build healthy relationships down the road. Goodbye. Take care.